They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes family holds the knife. I woke up to find $45,000 of my hard-earned life savings completely gone. It was not a nameless hacker. My own father drained it to fund my sister's fake, luxurious lifestyle. I did not cry. I did not give up. Instead, I smiled, set up a new chessboard, and prepared to watch them burn their own imaginary empire to the ground. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Lillian Burns. I am 24 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the invisible foundation upon which my family built their grand delusions. I work as a software engineer at AeroPulse Innovations, a tech firm where I routinely pull grueling 60-hour work weeks. While my peers spend their 20s traveling, dating, or partying, my life has been defined by cold, hard logic and an unyielding commitment to financial independence. I have tracked every single penny I have ever earned, living a quiet and fiercely frugal life. I eat cheap lunches, I drive a 10-year-old car, and I never buy anything I do not absolutely need. At work, I am respected for my intellect and my clean code. But the moment I step through the grand oak doors of my family home, my achievements are completely erased. This stark reality stands in direct, almost comical contrast to the world my father has meticulously fabricated. Arthur Burns is a director at Crestmont Wealth Management. To the outside world, or at least the world he desperately wants to impress, he is the very picture of aristocratic grace in the upscale, historic neighborhoods of Charleston, South Carolina. My father is a man utterly consumed by the intoxicating poison of prestige and the disease of saving face. He wears tailored suits he can barely afford, maintains expensive golf club memberships just to be seen, and speaks with a practiced, refined cadence that he developed specifically to blend in with the old money families of the South. He operates under the exhausting delusion that we are elite, and he expects everyone under his roof to uphold that theatrical performance at all costs. The star of his daily theater production is, without a doubt, my older sister, Serena. At 27 years of age, Serena is his undisputed golden child. She calls herself a social media key opinion leader, though her actual job description consists of spending obscene amounts of money to make strangers on the internet envious. Serena lives a life of extravagant luxury, constantly flaunting designer clothes, international vacations, and fine dining experiences. She has never held a real job. Instead, she is funded entirely by the bank of our father. Arthur spoils her unconditionally, viewing her aesthetic perfection and social climbing as a vital investment in the family's image. "Why do you always look so exhausted, Lillian?" Serena would often sneer, adjusting a $3,000 handbag on her shoulder as I walked in from a long shift. "You really need to invest in your appearance. No one is going to respect a girl who dresses like a high school math teacher." I would simply bite my tongue, knowing that any retaliation would only result in a harsh lecture from Arthur. He would wave his hand dismissively and say, "We must maintain appearances, Lillian. You do not understand how high society operates. Serena is securing our future." Meanwhile, my future was something I had to build entirely with my own two hands. For years, I had been diligently funneling my paychecks into a specific joint savings account. The balance sat proudly at $45,000. It was a sum built from countless overtime hours, skipped social events, and sheer willpower. However, there was a fatal flaw in my financial fortress. That account was opened when I was only 16 years old. It was the year my mother passed away, a time when I was too young to hold a bank account independently. Because of my minor status back then, Arthur was legally mandated to be listed as a joint owner and my guardian on the paperwork. I never thought to remove his name when I became an adult. Despite his financial vanity, I truly believed my father would never stoop so low as to steal from his own grieving daughter's rainy day fund. That $45,000 was not just currency to me, it was my literal ticket to freedom. I had spent the last 2 months working with a real estate agent, and I was finally preparing to use that money to put a down payment on my very first house. It was a modest, beautiful little place on the edge of town, far away from the suffocating, toxic air of Arthur's pretentious mansion. I was practically counting down the hours until I could sign the closing documents. I was so eager to permanently escape the stifling walls of a home where I was treated as a second-class citizen, a mere spectator to the glorious, fabricated life of Serena Burns. I thought I had finally won my independence. I had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath my feet had already been hollowed out. It was a Tuesday morning when the illusion of my future shattered. The air conditioning inside the First National Bank branch felt like a refreshing breeze against my skin. I walked up to the teller window with my real estate contracts neatly tucked inside my folder. My hands were trembling with anticipation. I slid my driver's license across the cold marble counter. "I need to authorize a wire transfer for a house down payment," I said, unable to keep the foolish smile off my face. $45,000, please, to the escrow account." The teller smiled kindly and began typing. Then her fingers stopped. She frowned, squinting at her monitor, and typed a few more keys. A heavy silence stretched between us. My heart did an uncomfortable flutter. "I am so sorry, miss," she whispered. "Are you absolutely sure you provided the correct account number? The balance shown here is exactly $12. The floor beneath my feet vanished. The blood drained from my face, leaving a cold, prickling sensation down my neck. "That is impossible," I stammered, gripping the counter tightly. "Please check it again. There should be $45,000. I just checked the balance last week." The teller turned her screen so I could see the glaring numbers. "A withdrawal was made exactly 3 days ago," she explained, her eyes filled with pity. "An in-person withdrawal for the full amount of $44,988. It was legally authorized by the primary joint account holder, Arthur Burns." I do not remember the drive back. I only remember the violent screech of my tires as I slammed on the brakes in our paved driveway. I stormed through the front doors, my vision narrowed by a blinding, suffocating rage. I found my father in his private study. He was sitting on his leather sofa, calmly sipping expensive bourbon while examining white silk fabric swatches. "Where is my money?" I screamed. My voice cracked so violently it tore at my throat. He did not flinch. He slowly set down his glass, looking at me with the mild irritation of a man whose reading had just been interrupted. "Lower your voice this instant, Lillian," he instructed smoothly. "You are acting like an uncultured animal. Sit down." I slammed my fists onto his antique desk. $45,000. Every single cent I had. You took everything. Where is it? Arthur sighed heavily, crossing his legs. I did not take anything. I simply reallocated our family resources where they were most urgently needed. Serena's engagement to Julian was announced this week. Do you know who Julian's family is? They own half the commercial shipping ports on the East Coast. We needed to host a proper gala to match their immense wealth. The venue rental, the imported catering, and her custom designer bridal gown. The initial deposits alone were astronomical. My lungs stopped working. He burned my entire sanctuary on a single party. "That was my house," I choked out, hot tears of fury welling up. "I worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years for that money. I skipped meals. I drove a broken car." Arthur leaned forward, his face hardening into an impenetrable mask of patriarchal dominance. "Family must help each other in times of need. When she marries Julian, this entire family's financial status will be elevated permanently. We will be set for life. You are young, Lillian. You have a solid job. You can easily earn that money back in a few short years. Do not be short-sighted." The study doors swung open, and Serena strolled into the room holding a glass of champagne. She wore a delicate silk robe that cost more than my entire wardrobe. "God, Lillian, why are you screaming?" she whined, rolling her eyes. "You are giving me a terrible migraine." I turned to her, my body shaking with an adrenaline rush. "You stole my life savings for a dress." Serena scoffed, taking an unbothered sip of her drink. "Oh, please spare me the drama. Stop being so selfish. This is the most important event of my life. You should be honored to contribute. It is not like you were going to use that money for anything glamorous anyway. A depressing little starter home? Really? Do not try to ruin the happiest day of my life just because you are jealous." I wanted to lunge across the room. I wanted to tear that smug confidence right off her face. But then, a cold truth slammed into my chest. The police would never help me. The bank would never help me. It was a joint account. Legally speaking, the law was entirely on his side. If I fought, they would label me hysterical and cast me onto the street with nothing. I fought to quiet my heavy gasps, forcing back the acidic burn of my unshed tears. Deliberately, I released my tight fists and let my tense shoulders sag. Meeting the eyes of the two smiling monsters before me, I did the single most difficult thing I had ever done in all my 24 years of life. I nodded. "You are right," I whispered, forcing my voice to sound defeated. "I am sorry. I was just shocked. I truly hope the dress is beautiful." Arthur smiled, a sickening, triumphant grin spreading across his face. "Good girl. I knew you would understand." I turned around and quietly walked out. I walked up the grand staircase, locked my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of my mattress. I was utterly broke. But as I stared at the blank wall, the suffocating grief began to evaporate. It was replaced by a crystalline, terrifying clarity. They wanted to play a ruthless game of high society survival. Fine. I would play their game, and I would secretly prepare to watch them burn. The next morning, I painted on the most convincing smile of my life. I walked down to the breakfast room where my sister and father were dining and offered a tearful, deeply rehearsed apology. "I was selfish," I lied, keeping my voice soft and compliant. "I was only thinking about myself, and I failed to see the bigger picture. I want to make it up to you, Serena. Let me help you coordinate the wedding vendors. I can manage the spreadsheets and handle the digital guest lists." Arthur looked up from his morning newspaper, his eyes gleaming with absolute patriarchal satisfaction. "I am glad you have finally come to your senses. Family unity is paramount in times like these." Serena barely looked up from her phone screen, but she eagerly tossed me her rose gold laptop. "Fine, you can organize the caterers and the florists. The passwords are saved in my browser. Do not mess up my desktop folders, and make sure the seating chart looks perfect." Just like that, I was in. I had the literal keys to the castle. They thought they were giving me mundane busy work, but they had just handed a seasoned software engineer completely unrestricted access to their entire digital lives. For the next 14 days, I played the perfect, subservient maid by day. I smiled at the wedding planners, I tasted expensive cake samples, and I nodded along to my father's endless lectures about high society. But when the clock struck midnight and the sprawling house went entirely dark, my bedroom transformed into a silent war room. The cold glow of 3 computer monitors illuminated my face as I began to systematically dismantle their privacy. Bypassing Serena's basic security measures took me exactly 4 minutes. Gaining access to my father's encrypted home office network was slightly more challenging, but Arthur was fundamentally an arrogant man who reused the same password variation for over 1 decade. Once I broke through the administrative firewall, I was swimming in a deep sea of heavily guarded secrets. I did not just look at the surface. I dug deep into the deleted folders, the archived email servers, and the hidden cloud storage drives. What I found was a rotting, hollow core beneath their shiny veneer. I started my deep dive with the golden child. Serena constantly bragged to her hundreds of thousands of followers about her booming independent cosmetics line. She called herself a self-made female entrepreneur. The reality, hidden in a labyrinth of frantic emails and terrifying balance sheets, was spectacularly pathetic. Her company was nothing more than a glorified pyramid scheme. She had been buying cheap, unregulated inventory in massive bulk and failing to sell even 10% of it. Worse, she had borrowed heavily from aggressive private lenders to fund her lavish marketing campaigns, her luxury trips abroad, and to simply keep up the illusion of immense success. I stared at the glowing screen as a sickeningly satisfying truth washed over me. Serena was currently sitting on a suffocating debt of exactly $285,000. I found a hidden folder filled with threatening legal notices from wholesale suppliers demanding immediate payment. I read frantic emails from her publicist begging for unpaid retainer fees. Suddenly, her desperate, manic rush to the altar made perfect sense. She did not love Julian. She was terrified. She was drowning financially, and the heir to a massive shipping fortune was her only life raft. She absolutely needed his family's money to quietly pay off her catastrophic debts before she ended up in federal prison for wire fraud. But if Serena's financial situation was a burning building, my father's secret life was a ticking nuclear bomb. I redirected my search to Arthur's private banking logs and encrypted legal files. He projected the flawless image of an elite wealth manager, but his personal ledgers told a grim story of desperate, illegal survival. I found the shocking documents buried deep in a disguised system folder on his main hard drive. Arthur had quietly taken out a second mortgage on our family estate 3 years ago. Then, unbelievably, I found the finalized paperwork for a third massive loan taken out just 8 months ago. My eyes widened in pure disbelief as I cross-referenced the signatures and the submitted income statements. To secure that third loan from a shadowy private equity firm, Arthur had brazenly forged legal documents. He had illegally inflated his annual salary at Crestmont Wealth Management by over 150% and completely falsified his credit history reports. He was taking out exorbitant, high-interest loans at 22% annual percentage rates just to pay the minimum monthly payments on his existing, older debts. The tailored designer suits, the exclusive country club membership fees, the luxury European car leases, every single piece of his aristocratic lifestyle was funded by phantom money and felony-level banking fraud. My heart pounded in the quiet of the night, not out of fear, but out of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. They were completely and utterly broke, both of them. They had stolen my $45,000 not just because they were greedy, but because my small savings account was the only real liquid cash left in this entire cursed family. With methodical, surgical precision, I began to harvest the data. I downloaded the forged mortgage applications. I saved every single threatening email from Serena's furious creditors. I exported the terrifying credit card statements, the unpaid vendor invoices, and the desperate, late-night text messages Arthur had sent to shady loan officers. I transferred gigabyte after gigabyte of undeniable, catastrophic proof onto 3 separate, highly encrypted external hard drives. I carefully scrubbed the system logs, making absolutely sure to leave zero digital footprint of my midnight intrusions. I sat back in my ergonomic chair and watched the final progress bar gracefully hit 100%. The picture was entirely complete. My father and my sister had spent their entire adult lives building a magnificent, towering empire of glass. They truly thought they were untouchable, standing at the very top. But looking at the explosive evidence safely stored in my hands, I realized they were actually balancing precariously on the edge of a very steep, very jagged cliff. They did not need to be destroyed by me. They had already ruined themselves. All I had to do was orchestrate one gentle, perfectly timed push. Revenge in the modern age is far too often wasted on a fleeting moment of social media clout. A lesser person might have taken all those downloaded files and dumped them onto a public forum, or created a viral video exposing the truth. But public outrage is fickle. It burns hot for exactly 24 hours and then vanishes into the digital abyss. I did not want a temporary scandal. I wanted complete, irreversible annihilation. I needed a trap so intricately woven that by the time they felt the silk threads tightening around their necks, they would already be financially and socially dead. My first target was the golden child. Serena thought she had secured a golden ticket to high society by manipulating Julian, but she severely underestimated the intense paranoia of old money. Billionaire shipping tycoons do not simply welcome outsiders into their bloodline without ironclad protection. I compiled every single piece of evidence regarding her failing cosmetics pyramid scheme, the $285,000 in hidden debt, and the desperate emails from her unpaid creditors. I printed out over 400 pages of undeniable financial ruin, bound them in a sterile black leather folder, and mailed it anonymously via a secure courier service. I did not send it to Julian. Love can make men incredibly blind and foolishly forgiving. Instead, I sent the massive dossier directly to the senior managing partner at the private law firm that represented Julian's family estate. Those ruthless corporate attorneys were paid millions of dollars annually to protect the family fortune from gold diggers. I knew they would read every single page with lethal efficiency. With Serena's future silently ticking toward detonation, I turned my attention to the Grand Patriarch. Arthur was currently riding a massive wave of arrogance because he was aggressively campaigning for a newly vacant vice president seat at Crestmont Wealth Management. He bragged about it endlessly at the dinner table. What he conveniently forgot to mention, but what I easily found on the company's internal public portal, was that senior executive promotions required a rigorous internal financial background check by the Corporate Ethics Committee. A wealth manager advising on billions of dollars of client funds simply cannot have a compromised personal balance sheet. Using an encrypted, offshore virtual private network, I drafted a meticulously detailed, anonymous whistleblower report. I attached the forged signature files, the falsified income statements, and the glaring proof of his 3 highly illegal, high-interest mortgages. I sent the email directly to the head of the Internal Audit Department and copied the Chief Compliance Officer. I flagged it as an urgent, Tier 1 ethics violation. In the highly regulated world of high finance, an accusation of massive mortgage fraud is not just a red flag. It is an immediate corporate death sentence. The final, most crucial phase of my plan required a stage. A private downfall was not good enough for a family that worshipped public perception. I needed a massive audience. A few days before the wedding, I found Serena aggressively reviewing the guest list for the rehearsal dinner. I poured her a cup of expensive tea and casually leaned over her shoulder. "It looks a bit intimate, does it not?" I asked softly, tracing a finger over the relatively short list of names. "Julian's family is hosting, right? This is your absolute best chance to show Charleston that you belong at the very top. If I were you, I would invite the heavy hitters. You should invite the mayor, the local media executives, and especially Father's boss, the chief executive officer of Crestmont. Imagine the respect Father will get when his boss sees him clinking glasses with a shipping dynasty." Serena's eyes widened. Her vanity, as always, was her ultimate weakness. The idea of cementing her status in front of the city's most powerful elite was a temptation she simply could not resist. "You are completely right, Lillian," she gasped, her manicured fingers flying across her keyboard to draft new, urgent premium invitations. "This cannot just be a dinner. This needs to be the social event of the entire decade. I want every important person in this state to witness my triumph." "Exactly," I smiled, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "Make it unforgettable." She spent the next 48 hours frantically calling in favors and expanding the guest list until the rehearsal dinner transformed into a massive, exclusive gala. Every single prominent figure in their fake, aristocratic world had confirmed their attendance. The net was fully cast. The stage was set perfectly. There was only one loose end left to tie up. I had to ensure my own physical absence. If I was standing in that room when the ceiling caved in, they would immediately try to drag me down into the rubble with them. They would point fingers, scream accusations, and demand that I fix the mess. I needed an unbreakable alibi. 2 days before the grand rehearsal dinner, I packed a sleek black suitcase and walked into my father's study. I handed him a printed itinerary. AeroPulse Innovations is sending me to a mandatory, week-long software engineering summit in Seattle, I explained, looking him dead in the eye. My flight leaves in exactly 4 hours. I am so sorry, but I'm going to miss the rehearsal dinner and the wedding. Arthur barely even looked up from his leather-bound planner. He waved his hand dismissively. Fine, it is probably for the best anyway. Your plain wardrobe would only look out of place among Julian's prestigious relatives. Just make sure you wire a decent cash gift. I turned my back on him and walked out the front door into the bright morning sun. As my rideshare pulled away from the sprawling, heavily mortgaged estate, I leaned back against the seat and let out a long, quiet breath. I was safely 3,000 miles away. The bombs were planted. The timers were set. All that was left to do was wait for the magnificent explosion. I was sitting in my quiet hotel room in Seattle, exactly 3,000 miles away from the chaos. The time was 8 o'clock in the evening on the West Coast, which meant it was 11 o'clock at night in Charleston. I did not need to be in the room to witness the explosion. Because my sister was a deeply vain social media influencer, she had naturally demanded that her personal assistant live-stream the entire rehearsal dinner toast to her hundreds of thousands of followers. I was lying on my bed, staring at my glowing tablet, watching my family's grand execution broadcasted in high definition. The venue was the most exclusive historic ballroom in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a golden glow over the tables adorned with imported white orchids. Hundreds of the most powerful people in the state were seated, dressed in their finest evening wear. On the screen, my father stood at the head table. Arthur tapped a silver spoon against his crystal champagne flute. The room fell silent. He smoothed his tailored tuxedo jacket and puffed out his chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, his voice dripping with practiced aristocratic charm. "Tonight, we do not just celebrate the union of two wonderful individuals. We celebrate the joining of two legacy families. The Burns family has always valued excellence, integrity, and above all else, legacy. Julian, we welcome you." Arthur never finished his speech. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the ballroom did not just open. They were shoved open with violent force. The camera panned wildly as the entire room gasped. Marching down the center aisle was not a late guest. It was a team of 4 massive, unsmiling private security guards dressed in dark suits. Flanking them was the senior managing partner of the law firm I had mailed the dossier to, holding that exact black leather folder in his right hand. Walking closely behind the lawyer was Julian's father, a man whose face was dark with absolute murderous fury. Julian himself looked pale and utterly terrified. Arthur froze, his champagne glass still raised in the air. "Excuse me," Arthur stammered, his confident facade slipping. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Julian's father snatched the microphone straight out of Arthur's hand. The feedback shrieked through the ballroom speakers, causing the elite guests to cover their ears. "The meaning," the billionaire shipping tycoon roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, "is that there will be no wedding tomorrow. There will be no joining of families. We are done." A collective gasp rippled through the hundreds of attendees. Serena jumped up from her chair, her custom silk dress knocking over a glass of red wine. It spilled across the white tablecloth like fresh blood. "Julian!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and panicked. "Julian, what is going on? What is your father doing?" The senior lawyer stepped forward and slammed the thick black folder onto the head table. We received a highly detailed, anonymous package yesterday morning, the lawyer announced loudly, ensuring every single politician, media executive, and old money socialite in the room could hear him. Miss Serena Burns is not a successful cosmetics entrepreneur. She is currently drowning in exactly $285,000 of hidden, delinquent debt from an illegal pyramid scheme. She is facing multiple impending lawsuits for wire fraud and unpaid vendor invoices. She targeted my client's son specifically to use our family trust fund to pay off her catastrophic financial failures. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of deafening silence that precedes a massive earthquake. Serena's face drained of all color. She looked like a ghost staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. The live stream chat on my tablet was exploding with thousands of comments, scrolling so fast I could barely read them. "That is a lie," Arthur bellowed, slamming his fist onto the table, trying desperately to salvage his shattered pride. "My daughter is a brilliant, independent businesswoman. We are a family of immense wealth and status. Whoever sent that is a jealous liar, and I will sue you for defamation." But a trapped, cornered rat will always turn and bite. As the lawyer began pulling out the printed pages of threatening creditor emails and dropping them onto the tables for the guests to see, Serena completely lost her mind. The sheer terror of going to federal prison and losing her billionaire ticket broke her. "It is his fault!" Serena suddenly screamed, pointing a trembling finger directly at our father. The entire ballroom froze again. "Do not look at me like that. He forced me to do it. He demanded that I keep up the image of a wealthy influencer so he could impress his country club friends." Arthur turned to her, his jaw dropping in genuine horror. "Serena, shut your mouth this instant." "No!" she shrieked hysterically, tears ruining her expensive makeup. "You are broke too. You cannot even afford this dinner. You are drowning in debt. Do you think I do not know? I had to survive. That is why I secretly opened 3 high-limit credit cards under your Social Security number last year. I maxed out all 3 of them just to pay for my marketing campaigns because you refused to give me more cash. You are legally responsible for another $90,000 of my debt right now, and you did not even know it." I actually gasped aloud in my hotel room. I had no idea about the credit cards. The golden child had stolen her own father's identity and pushed him even further into the abyss. It was poetic justice so profound, so intensely beautiful, that I could not have scripted it better myself. The thief had been violently backstabbed by the very thief he had raised. Arthur clutched his chest, his eyes bulging out of his head as the reality of her confession hit him. "You did what?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and cardiac panic. "You stole my identity?" But the universe was not finished delivering its punishment. From the third row of the stunned audience, a tall, silver-haired man stood up. It was the chief executive officer of Crestmont Wealth Management, Arthur's boss. The man Arthur had spent the last 2 months desperately trying to impress for a promotion. The chief executive officer was not looking at the stage. He was staring down at his glowing smartphone screen. The urgent email from the corporate audit committee had arrived exactly on schedule. He slowly raised his head, looking at Arthur with a mixture of pure disgust and professional fury. "Arthur!" His boss's voice cut through the chaotic murmurs of the room like a sharp blade. "I just received an emergency, Tier 1 ethics report from our internal compliance board. It includes verified documents showing you forged your income statements and falsified company letterheads to secure 3 massive fraudulent mortgages on your estate." Arthur stepped back, hitting the wall behind the stage. "Sir, please, I can explain." "Do not speak," the executive barked, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "You are supposed to manage billions of dollars of our clients' money, and you are committing blatant mortgage fraud to fund this pathetic circus? You are suspended immediately. Security will pack up your office tonight. Expect a call from our legal department and the federal authorities by tomorrow morning. I am leaving this circus." The executive turned and walked out, followed quickly by the mayor and the rest of the high society guests who were desperate to flee the blast radius of this colossal scandal. Julian's family turned their backs and marched out the double doors, leaving the black folder sitting on the table like a tombstone. Within 5 minutes, the grand ballroom was entirely empty of guests. The only people left were the catering staff, the confused musicians, and my family. The live stream was still running, capturing every pathetic, agonizing second. The grand illusion was dead. The polished, aristocratic facade of the Burns family had been violently stripped away, leaving only two desperate, broke criminals screaming at each other in an empty room. Arthur lunged forward, cursing Serena for ruining his life and stealing his credit. Serena screamed back, blaming him for raising her to be a monster. They threw wine glasses. They knocked over the expensive floral arrangements. They rolled around in the wreckage of their own making. I reached out and gently tapped the screen of my tablet, closing the video feed. The silence in my hotel room was profound and incredibly peaceful. They were destroyed, and they had absolutely no one to blame but themselves. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely devoid of any cinematic violence. For people who base their entire existence on the perception of wealth, being exposed as broke criminals is a fate far worse than physical pain. It is a complete eradication of their identity. 4 days after I returned from Seattle, my phone rang. The caller identification displayed my father's number. I answered it, letting the heavy silence hang in the air. "Lillian," Arthur gasped. His voice was no longer the booming, aristocratic baritone that used to command the dining table. It was the pathetic, high-pitched wheeze of a terrified, broken old man. "Lillian, you have to help us. The bank representatives are outside the estate right now. They are putting foreclosure notices on the front doors. They froze all my accounts. You make a good salary at Aeropulse Innovations. You have to take out a personal loan. Wire me everything you have. We need to hire defense attorneys before they issue the arrest warrants." I leaned back in my office chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. "I do not have any money to give you," I said calmly. "You took all of it, remember?" "That is in the past," he shrieked, the raw panic tearing at his vocal cords. "This is about survival. I am your father. You cannot just let me go to federal prison." A cold, deeply satisfied smile spread across my face. "You took my life savings and told me it was an investment in the family's reputation," I replied, my voice steady and entirely devoid of pity. "So go embrace that reputation. Let us see if it keeps you warm in a jail cell." I ended the call before he could utter another syllable. I went into my phone settings and blocked his number, my sister's number, and the house landline permanently. The invisible, toxic chains that had bound me to them for 24 years finally snapped, leaving me completely free. The legal system dismantled the rest of their lives with ruthless efficiency. 2 weeks later, agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation raided the Charleston estate. Arthur was indicted on multiple federal charges, including aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and massive mortgage fraud. With his assets entirely liquidated to pay restitution to the banking institutions, he could not afford a high-powered legal defense team. He was appointed a public defender and currently faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 7 to 10 years in federal prison. Serena's fate was equally poetic. The billionaire shipping family sued her for intentional infliction of emotional distress and fraud, adding to the towering mountain of lawsuits from her unpaid cosmetic suppliers. To avoid being served with dozens of legal subpoenas, the former golden child fled South Carolina in the middle of the night. Through the grapevine of a mutual acquaintance, I learned that the glamorous social media influencer is now working double shifts as a waitress in a cheap, greasy diner somewhere in rural Ohio. She deleted all her social media accounts. Her imaginary empire was completely erased from the internet. They lost absolutely everything. Finances, social standing, and their precious dignity were wiped off the face of the earth. As for me, the universe has a funny way of rewarding those who play the long game. The same week my father was indicted, I received a massive promotion at Aeropulse Innovations to senior lead engineer, complete with a substantial salary increase and a heavy signing bonus. 3 months later, I sat at a large mahogany table in a real estate office. I picked up a black pen and signed the final closing documents. I bought the house. I did it entirely with my own money, my own excellent credit, and my own unyielding hard work. Tonight, I am standing on the balcony of my beautiful new home. The evening breeze is cool, and the neighborhood is perfectly quiet. I am holding a glass of expensive red wine, taking a slow sip as I look out over the city lights. I left the people who shared my blood behind in the ashes of their own destruction, and I have never felt more alive. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Vivian Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.